Welcome to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato holding it down in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for everybody. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network, our YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and all those great places here. Fun one coming up today. The tickets are stamped for the NBA Finals. The Dallas Mavericks will take on the Boston Celtics. We'll get you the way too early look at that matchup, plus the opening line for this series that I do not understand. But Claudia, why don't you tell everyone else what else we're going to get into today before we go there?
Oh, that plus money, baby. Give it to me. Yes, we have a stacked show for this Friday. Inside the Ropes with Keegan, PGA Tour golfer Keegan Bradley will join us at the top of the show. Catching the bag, Jalen Waddle getting paid, his new deal with Miami. And special look, Casey's approach to the new kickoff rules. And we're going to talk about this finals matchup. But first, Senior, you said you came to a realization this morning that made you stop and think. What was that?
I'm old. That I'm old. Now,
okay.
I mean, one of the things along those lines is as I'm sitting here with a 30-something and a 20-something doing a show, which I'm having a ball doing, but every now and then you get the reminders of just your age, and I get that by looking in the mirror and seeing the gray, though, which I enjoy and I like, and I'll never cover up. But I'm back at Notre Dame now, and it's reunion time. And my brother Greg, I graduated in 1985. My brother Greg graduated in 1984. And he is staying at our house right now for his 40th year reunion. And it just made me realize that next year, that's exactly what Mike, me and your mother are going to be doing. We're going to have our 40-year reunion next year as I'm watching my brother Greg go through that right now. And it just kind of hit me as like, oh my God, you sit here and watch, you see the people coming in and they have special dorms if you want to stay in a dorm for the years you've been out. And they have, the magical dorm is the 50-year people, right? Is the people that are here for their 50th year reunion have a special dorm if you want to stay in it. They do a lot of things for them. And I realized I'm just 10 years away from that. I mean, my God, when did this happen? When did I get this old? My 40-year reunion is next year. And it just kind of hit me when my brother Greg, walked in going to his. I thought, oh, man. So I'm a little depressed. I need to be brought up a little bit.
Well, according to everybody, apparently in the sports media world and all of Gojo's friends, you're aging like fine wine. So is it really that sad, Senior?
Well, I mean, I do appreciate all those kind words. But Claudia, I get stuck on, while you say aging like fine wine, I get stuck on aging. And I stop there. I'm aging. My wife and I celebrated our 37th anniversary yesterday, which was phenomenal.
Congratulations.
It was great. Yeah, thank you. But there's just something about the 40-year reunion that hits a little bit. So, yeah, do I feel good for 61? Yes, I feel in really good shape. I lost a lot of weight from football, feeling good and all that. But still, that number kind of hits you. There are times when it hit. Turning 50 didn't do a whole lot. I didn't feel bad about it. Turning 60, where there was a little more to that. And now a 40-year reunion. I mean, you guys probably can't even fathom that at this point with how young you guys are.
No, I mean, listen, I'm a little stunned here because my mom is incredibly young and full of life. For you, it makes a lot more sense because your bones creak when you walk, and I can hear you enter any room. So this is an understandable point. Dad, what I'm worried about for you is what I saw when I was back for my 10-year reunion a couple years ago, which was that group of the 50-year reunion people getting back there. Because like you said, there's sort of a hallowed respect for that group when they come back on campus, everything they've met through the university over the years. But I remember so vividly walking up to check in at my reunion, and I see a guy from the class that was having their 50th that year, and he walks up to one of the ushers there and with such unsure, like shaky air about him, asks him, where did they move the football stadium to? This was after Notre Dame had renovated the stadium in 2017. And I realized if you hadn't been back to campus for a while, which I'm sure some of your peers haven't been, it probably looks like a foreign country at this point. So I'm worried about what's going to do that for you, Dad. There's a Taco Bell on campus now. There's a Smash Burger over there. All stuff that you know because you live there. Well, but some of your peers are really going to struggle with maybe the new ordering system. And I'm worried about your ability to help them digest this technology and get to that point when they're back.
Yeah, I hope they don't ask me because I will not know. But I do know where everything is, living here 6 months out of the year. So I definitely have that in my back pocket. But you're right. If you haven't been here in a while, it's going to be different. I know, Mike, you're on like year 12 out. Claudia, say it softly. How many years you been out of college now?
Graduated 2019. Yeah.
It's so honestly, the funny thing I'm thinking about now, Dad, is you guys in the dorms, though, because like Claudia, if she went back to reunion right now and they're like, hey, do you want to stay in the dorms or whatever? She's not that far removed from it.
I'd
like
say
the 5 year, we
not.
all stayed in it. I mean, listen, in my 5-year reunion, we went back. We all stayed in the dorms, and it was awesome because Notre Dame wasn't a dry campus when I was there, but then you get back for this, and all of a sudden the school's providing you alcohol. We had a big tent outside the dorm that had beer and wine nonstop, basically 24 hours for you, but we dragged a keg into the dorm. We were throwing parties like we were back in school. Everybody understood the assignment because the breaks came off this. Dad, I can't fathom any of the 40-year reunion people taking them up on the offer to go sleep in a single dorm bed.
So, and I'm trying to remember, me and your mother came back. I don't know if it was for an anniversary, like way back, like when you guys had these, like a reunion, or if it was for another reason. But we said, oh, let's stay in the dorm. How cool that would be. Let's go stay in the dorm. We were, and this is in the summer. It's basically June right now, right? It's summertime and it can be very hot, or it's not bad here now, but it can be hot. I remember her and I went into the dorm. We were in the dorm for maybe an hour. And this is back when, these new dorms didn't have air conditioning. These dorms don't have air conditioning. We were in there maybe an hour, like, no, out. We were gone to a hotel. So I don't know. I guess a lot would be which dorm you get put in, because there are dorms here. The newer dorms have air conditioning. The older dorms don't, which I don't understand how you can charge the same boarding price for paying students at a college if one dorm has air conditioning and the other does not. It seems ridiculous you can charge the same amount. But, I mean, now at least you guys, I know, Mike, had air conditioning. We did not. We were in the dorm for an hour. We got the hell out.
I don't know if we had air conditioning in the one that we stayed in. I do know that's an incredibly unique problem, especially on some older campuses like Notre Dame, which stinks, but this is higher ed, baby. They can charge whatever they want. And we'll certainly get into more as it pertains to some of the changes in higher ed later in the show. Colin Cowherd with a spicy take about the Notre Dame USC rivalry. Yes. That I'm looking forward to talking about in a bit. But speaking of the heat being on, man, the Dallas Mavericks went into Minnesota last night and cranked that thing all the way up early. The Mavs moving on to the NBA Finals, Dad, they go in and bully the Timberwolves. 124-103 honestly undersells what a blowout this game was. Really, after Luka Doncic came out in the first quarter and had 12 points in the first minute and a half of this game, they put their foot down on the gas and never looked back, Dad. And so we'll get ready for the conference look. We'll look back a little bit at the season from the Minnesota Timberwolves, but how impressed were you by the Dallas Mavericks and the tone they set early in this game?
Well, so impressed that if I were Claudia and the Boston Celtics fans, I would be worried. I know Claudia is going to get to the who's favorite. I know Boston is and the numbers and everything, but man, Dallas looks good. Just how Minnesota kind of fizzled out, Dallas is kind of ramping up right now, right? I mean, when Luka and Kyrie are on, and when you're again, they both scored 36 in this one. So the last duo to score 35 or more in a conference final game was a couple of guys named Kobe and Shaq back in 2001. So that's pretty damn good company. And we've talked about Kyrie, can be sometimes hot and cold, but he has been on. And when he is on, and some of the ancillary players they have that are playing well, this team is peaking at the right time, and now they get some time off for Luka to heal up a little bit as well. For all of them, quite honestly. Nobody's 100% right now, but a lot of the focus is on Luka because we see all the ailing that's going on with him, but everybody is hurting at this point. I love the way they're playing, Mike, and they may be hitting their stride at the right time to take on, what is the best team in the league in the Boston Celtics. They played twice this year. Boston won both those games handily, and all the stars played in those games as well. If anybody wants to take anything from that, you can or you can't, or whatever you want to do, but everybody was in that game. So I understand Boston being favored, but I love the way Dallas is playing now.
They did it swiftly, and we talked about the paths, and everyone's saying how easy the Celtics' path has been, and we said if Minnesota is the one they face, that's going to be very different in terms of the path. But just the fact that Dallas made it look so easy after Minnesota swept the Suns, took down the defending champ Denver Nuggets, and the Mavs were like, oh, you don't think we can play defense? Oh, you don't think we can out-rebound you? You don't think we can outplay in the paint? Well, they did all of that. And then you have Luka, who scores 20 points in the first quarter. How many points did Minnesota score? 19. So he outscored the opposing team in the first quarter. And we've talked about this, the Batman-Robin situation. And I'm curious what you guys think about this. I'll give you the odds in a second. If you had to pick the Batman and Robin, are you going Tatum and Brown, or are you going Kyrie and Luka? I have the answer, and I feel pretty strongly about this one. Celtics minus 215 favorites for the series. You can get the Mavs at plus 175. First game, June 6th on Thursday. Celtics 6-point favorites at home. And if you're going to give me 6 with this Mavs team, I'm going to take it, Gojo.
Yeah, I would agree. And if you're asking me which of those, Batman and Robin duos I take, it's Luka and Kyrie. The sell with the Celtics is everything else. It's the depth. It's the other parts of this roster. It's Derek White. It's Drew Holiday. It's maybe getting Kristaps Porzingis finally back in this postseason run for that team. But as far as the weight on the shoulders of two people, Dad, we talked about this, I think, when you were out driving from Arizona to South Bend. The ultimate measure of a superstar is how much easier in the biggest moments can you make it for the rest of your teammates. And there are times down the stretch in crunch time where, man, you want to talk about a tale of two cities. The Boston Celtics and Jason Tatum off malign for the clutch time statistics that he's had over the course of this year, versus Luka and Kyrie, who are on a Dallas Mavericks team that in the season was second in clutch time production in the NBA and has continued that largely through the postseason. Didn't need it last night, but through the first 3 games of this series, anytime it was close down the stretch in the fourth quarter, the table all of a sudden started to tilt in favor of Dallas. So I think if you're the Celtics, you're concerned about that. You're concerned about, being the team with home court advantage and seeing the Mavs have now won their last 5 games on the road going back to the OKC series. So this team is battle tested in all the ways that can hurt the Boston Celtics.
So we sit here and talk about the duo stars, obviously with Tatum and Brown and Luka and Kyrie. But to me, the matchup is the backcourt for Boston, right? Drew Holiday and Derek White. I mean, these are 2 second-team All-NBA defensive players. Now get to match up against Luka and Kyrie. That, to me, is going to be fantastic to watch. And then on the inside, is Porzingis going to be around? Al Horford is 38 years old. I mean, you've got Gafford, you've got Lively, 2 big guys. Gafford, I think, is the epitome. It might as well be Daniel Alley-oop Gafford. The amount of alley-oops that guy has had and slams he has had has been ridiculous in the postseason. So you wonder, about the paint and how that's going to work in favor, I think, of Dallas. So, this is a tough one for me. There's part of, and it's probably recency bias, right? I just saw Dallas beat the brakes off Minnesota in the series, and Boston getting through each team who was losing their best player. So that's probably an unfair look right now at it. But there's no doubt Dallas has gone through the tougher road here, and they have gone through that road, pretty impressively, and pretty smoothly. So, there's part of me that's going to pick them. I'm not making my official pick yet, but I'm leaning that way.
So I think this series is impossible to pick before we know what version of Kristaps Porzingis we're going to get and what we hear about his ramp up before we get to June 6th, because you're right, that factor on the interior. We talk about the backcourt matchup, and I heard Charles Barkley say, hey, Boston's got 4 guys that can defend Luka Doncic, and Shaq sort of scoff at that, which I sort of agree with. Like, defending Luka Doncic is a relative term, but that matchup on the interior, the front court, because when they got Derek Lively back last night, Dad, it was a big boost for them. He is the much more offensively inclined of the two between him and Daniel Gafford, but both of them provide that edge. We talked about the interior presence this postseason has sort of been like the revival of the run game in football for the past couple of years, where it might not be your defining trait, but it's part of the floor that you have to be a team that's going to make it anywhere meaningful in this postseason. So those will be interesting matchups, and the pick will be predicated on that. The one that surprised me a little bit on DraftKings Sportsbook was the finals MVP odds. Jason Tatum, a pretty overwhelming favorite, -115 to Luka, +205. And I understand part of that is Boston's a big favorite, and so people assume. But we're just coming off an Eastern Conference final where Jaylen Brown was the MVP. We know this Celtics team, if they get Kristaps back, is going to have another guy with the ball in his hands that could potentially detract from some of that. I was surprised Luka wasn't closer, Dad, just because as good as Kyrie Irving has been and as good as that Mavs team has been, I still think if they win, there's no question it's going to be because of what Luka's done.
I agree. If it's Dallas, it's going to be Luka. If it's Boston, we're not sure who it's going to be. Is it going to be Tatum or Brown? So, Claudia, I wonder from your part, being a Celtic fan, could this be twofold? Tatum was Brown was the conference finals MVP. If they were to win and he were to be the MVP, is it now Brown's team and not Tatum's team in Boston?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I think it's really good for him that he is already the highest paid player, because it's like now he's expected to play this way. And we always talked about how everyone was very comfortable with their roles, but it's been interesting to see how Tatum is okay with Brown sort of taking on this leadership role both on the court and off. So that is a question we'll have to wait and see. I do, to your point, though, think there's a ton of value at +650 because he has been that clutch player. And speaking of clutch points, I have to bring this up because Kyrie at 22-1. I get it. Everybody would think if it's going to be somebody on Dallas, it's going to be Luka. But I'm looking at the clutch time points right now. Jalen Brunson, by the way, had 49, which is absolutely insane in the post. But Kyrie had the second most. And when it comes to awards like this, if it's going to be a tight series, it's going to be those clutch points that matter. So with a market like this, I'm not going to lay, even if it is just 115. I don't love betting a favorite because this is a fluctuating market, right? If Tatum doesn't look great, you're going to end up getting plus money. So I'd probably wait off, or I'd bet Luka, or I'd bet a Brown, or I'd bet Kyrie, sprinkle a little bit on all of them because you can get them all at plus money. But that number seems a little bit too long for what we know Kyrie can do. And imagine the storyline, guys. Him in Boston. Come on, Gojo.
Oh. I mean, Dad, it really is tailor-made to have that guy who last time we saw him was the subject of ire for a lot of Celtics fans. And, you know, Kyrie, we've talked a lot about his growth this postseason. And certainly I think since that point in time, the way basketball and life have treated Kyrie Irving into the player that we've gotten now off that. But there's no doubt the fangs are going to be out. I have to imagine that first trip back to TD Garden for him is going to be very interesting at best. And we'll have plenty of time to look ahead to get to that.
Yeah.
Certainly want to also look back at the Minnesota Timberwolves season and what they're building on. We'll get to some sound later on from their leader in Anthony Edwards and what this team's moving on. But Dad, as far as getting ready for the finals, did you see the real critical moment, maybe the biggest play made last night after the game? Was Dallas Mavericks assistant GM Michael Finley, former NBA player himself, walking up and swiping the beer from Luka Doncic after the game. Luka hanging out with his dad in the tunnel, enjoying a victory beer. And while he was hugging someone, Michael Finley comes over and very casually swipes the beer out of Luka's hand, goes and daps up Dad, and then walks off. Luka Doncic, we know, is one for a good recovery beer. He's a very relatable body type, but they have decided, no, the job is not done and reined him back in a little bit. How would you feel, Dad, someone swiping your victory beer?
Yeah, whatever hand they swipe my victory beer with would be hurt. Yeah, no one's taking my beer. Go ahead and have yourself a beer after that. Are you kidding me? Last I checked, Luka, he's not 19 years old, right? He's allowed to drink a beer. And it's not like he was, handstanding a keg. I mean, he had a cup of beer. I mean, let the man have a cup of beer. What was it, a cup or was it? I didn't see it.
It
was a beer.
Yeah.
It was
so a can of beer. Maybe it wasn't one of their sponsors. I don't know. Maybe, was that it, or was he just swiping the beer from him? I mean, come on.
He's being a party pooper. Man, they don't play till Thursday. Let Luka drink whatever beer he wants. Gosh.
Yeah. Oh, I see it. Okay, I see him. I see him taking it now. It was very, very subtle how he did it, and then Luka just kind of looked at him and kind of shrugged. Let the man have a damn celebratory beer.
Seriously. Oh.
So smooth. Luka took it in stride. It's time to lock in, baby. It's NBA Finals time, and everybody get ready. All right, welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato here. And we got something exciting that we get to talk about today, courtesy of our friends over at DraftKings Rainmakers. And to help us out with that, we get to bring in Keegan Bradley, the 14th ranked player in the world, the winner of the 2011 PGA Championship, kind enough to join us here and kind enough to escort some lucky winner at Memorial next weekend. So the Rainmakers Tournament VIP experience is going to happen at the Memorial Tournament next weekend. One lucky winner from the Rainmakers Masters sweepstakes at DraftKings is going to be walking inside the ropes with Keegan and getting VIP tickets to the tournament. So Keegan, first and foremost, good morning. Thank you for joining us. And have you done something like this before where you've had like a layperson walking with you inside the ropes here while you're trying to go out here and compete?
I most certainly have not, but I look forward to it. What an incredible prize from DraftKings that's going to be.
Oh.
If I could have done that as a kid, I would have been really, really pumped. But it's going to be interesting. I look forward to it.
So along those lines, not for this person who's walking inside the ropes, but for the galleries and the thousands and thousands of people you played in front of that proximity-wise are close to you guys. And golf is one of those sports so many people can try and do, even though we all suck, but we all think we can do better than we can. So do you get people actually saying things to you of a club you should use or giving you advice as a patron outside the ropes?
Yeah, the new one is, now that golf gambling's legal, that they'll scream at you. They bet you this week and you screwed it up, or you're on my fantasy lineup and you just made a book. Meanwhile, I'm pissed, and they're yelling at me because I'm screwing up their fantasy lineup. That's always a beauty.
Dear God. All right, so we've devolved into real life Happy Gilmore, which is great.
Yes.
Keegan, along those lines, obviously, there was a lot that happened that was very serious at Valhalla. There was one of the most unprecedented incidences in all of golf here. Has it now gotten to the point where other guys on tour have been just texting Scotty Scheffler the picture of his mugshot in that jumpsuit? Have we arrived at that point where it can be a joke now?
Yeah, I mean, I played with Scotty on Thursday, Friday of Colonial the week after, and everyone in the crowd was having his mugshot shirts that were walking around. So Scotty is such a good guy, and it's so great that he's got this now because I think it's sort of funny, and I think it was so ridiculous. Thank God it all worked out.
Yeah, a line nobody ever saw coming was a golfer saying I was stretching in my jail cell getting ready to start my round. That was certainly a new one. So we talked about this contest for the Memorial next weekend, and then the U.S. Open is the week after that. For our sport in football, when we go to the playoffs, we always talk about how everything ramps up for a playoff game. Is it that way for a major that you have in a couple weeks, and when the majors pop up, do things ramp up for you, or as golfers, do you have to kind of stay of single mind and focus?
They definitely ramp up. You feel it from the moment that you show up to the course on Thursday to Sunday. It's just different. It's going to be an extreme challenge. I mean, way harder, especially the U.S. Open. It's going to be brutal. And, you played it enough, you can sort of figure out how to prepare for majors, what to do, what not to do. I early in my career, I'd be at the course for too long, too many balls. And at the time I got to play, I'd be exhausted. So you learn sort of what works best for you and to play your best golf.
Is there pressure you feel now? Obviously, we talked about it. 2011, you won a major at the PGA Championship. It's certainly been a gap in time there. Does it change the way and the pressure that you put on yourself to try and go out and get another one of these?
Well, yeah, because I would love to win one. I luckily I checked that box when I was younger. A lot of these guys have to go out and they haven't won one, and it's brutal. But once you win a major and feel what it's like, you crave to be back out there in contention and have a chance to win. And these are life-changing tournaments. So if you can win, winning the U.S. Open would be spectacular. Something that I dreamt about as a kid.
For those that don't know, they just watch you guys from Thursday to Sunday and see what you do. But what goes into it? Always the behind-the-scene things. How many balls do you hit during the week before you even tee off on Thursday? How much goes into it each week?
Well, so I'll show up. I planned the week before, but normally I'd show up on Sunday and I'd start then. But we want to first off, you want to get all the lines off the tees and figure out where we're going to hit this ball to get it in the best position to make a birdie or best score. And then when you get up around the greens, you want to hit every single shot that you might see in the tournament. So, there's a back right pin. We know that's going to be there on Sunday. The miss is long right, or it's in the bunker to the right. So you up in there, hit a bunch of shots. And, you do that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, sometimes Sunday. And, you're hitting all the shots that you expect that you might see. And then, you go to the range and you got your coach there and you're warming up and you're just trying to get your game in a place that, gives you the best chance to win. And sometimes you get to these majors and you just don't have it and you can tell, and it's brutal. But then other times you'll be there and on Tuesday you feel really, really nice and you just want to play the tournament.
So you've got the micro of that, of getting ready for these individual tournaments. We mentioned having a major coming up. And then there's the macro in the sport of what feels like hanging over everyone's head still are all these discussions about the LIV and PGA merger. You've heard a bunch of players come out and talk about how this needs to happen now because there's waning interest in some of the television aspects of golf. Is that something that boots on the ground you guys feel that gets talked about when you're out here golfing with guys in these tournaments about you guys looking forward to when this is finally going to happen, or if?
Yeah, I think, that's the number one conversation in the locker room and the lunch. It's just, we're just all sort of sick of dealing with all this. And, I think what's best would be to get us all back together to play. And, you see it at the majors, how great these majors have been with everybody there. And we all hope that, someday we can look back at this time and think about, remember back in that day when we all didn't play together and how crazy this was? Hopefully that'll be a distant memory soon.
Yeah, distant memory, but boy, a lot of people got paid for that distant memory. That's for sure.
They sure did.
All right. Yeah. All right. On the other side of it, you're a Vermont guy. You're a Boston sports fan. And while the Memorial's going on, now the games will be at night where you're golfing during the day. How will it be while your Celtics are playing in the finals as you're playing in the Memorial next week?
Yeah, I can't wait. I feel so. It's my favorite thing is Boston sports. So I when I wake up and I got a game on, I know later I got a game. It just feels I'm happier, I'm more excited. So this Boston team is just so unbelievable to watch, and to watch how dominant they are. I will say I feel even terrible saying this. I wanted them to lose one game so I could go see them on Wednesday, but that didn't work. I'm watching them. The Pacers cough up 3 games that they probably should have won. But I'm just so thrilled to watch them play. We got some OTAs with the Patriots, so we're ramping up.
So let me ask, Thursday, they play Thursday night at 8:00, which means it's not going to end till late. If you have an early tee time on Friday, will you be able to stay up and watch the entire game?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the finals games, playoff games, it takes precedent over any sort of golf stuff.
There we go. A man with his priorities in the right place. He's already downloading Drake May highlights from training camp in New England and getting ready to go out here. And should he start week 1?
I don't know if he should start week 1, but I see him starting, week 5, 6, somewhere in there. I don't know. I actually was watching some OTA clips the other day, and just watching his ball compared to the other guys, it's so much faster. It's so much more. It goes straight. I don't know. It just looks different.
He's got a gun.
Listen, Keegan Bradley, he's just like us. He's ruthlessly digesting OTA's film, jonesing for the fall. But in the meantime, you guys can go and follow at DK Rainmakers on Twitter for all the updates on the PGA Tour Drop Pack. Give you a chance to go and walk behind the ropes for a VIP experience at Memorial Tournament with Keegan Bradley, one of the best in the world and one of our favorite guests around here. Keegan, we always appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much. Best of luck in the next few weeks here. And we're excited to watch you go do your thing.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Keegan.
Awesome stuff there.
How about that now?
Dad, what would you do if you were walking behind the ropes with one of these guys? You've golfed at that American Century tournament. You've been out in the mix there. What would you do as the layperson walking with the pro?
Keep my mouth shut. And actually, it wouldn't be shut. My jaw drops at watching these guys hit the ball. Their tee shots sound like cannon shots. Their accuracy is amazing. It is incredible to watch as you hack it up on a golf course to watch what the pros can do. It's really unreal.
Welcome back to Gojo and Golic. Our thanks to Keegan Bradley for joining us in the last segment there. One of our favorite guys on the tour. Excited to watch him at Memorial next weekend. And Dad, excited in the future to watch what this Minnesota Timberwolves team can do. So obviously they went out sorry last night on their home court, absolutely drubbed by this Dallas Mavericks team who came out and extinguished the light from their eyes almost instantly in this game. Luka Doncic hitting 30-foot three-pointers, vaporizing this team. And I think reminding us, Dad, we've heard so much this postseason, and this Minnesota team actually got asked coming off the last round if they felt like they needed to lose one of these series as a young team in order to get the requisite experience to come back. How that's sort of the rite of passage in the NBA. But I think we did see, especially in this game, the way Dallas attacked Anthony Edwards defensively, the way they were able to frustrate this team on the interior. It's probably a group that does need a bit more seasoning, even if we got all excited over Anthony Edwards. So what was your takeaway for Minnesota as we now put them to rest for this season?
Well, I think it's a team that got some experience, right? They got to see what this round was like, and they got to see how they were just completely let's say they were outclassed in this. They were outplayed in this. So I think you take that as a learning experience. It's one of those moments where you figuratively, in this case, watch the confetti fall, step back, look at what just went on, how bad you got beaten, and say, okay, we've got a good team. We've showed we have a good team. We showed we are right at the top with Oklahoma City and Denver. It came down to the last day to decide the seeding, that we should be good enough to go further in this and get to the finals. So this is a great learning experience, I think, for them, Mike.
It is, and it's one that has not, I think, stymied any of their confidence here, especially if you listen to Anthony Edwards. Here was the Minnesota Timberwolves star after the game talking about the future for this team.
I just said we'll be back next year. We never clicked all together as a team in this series, not even one game. I think that was the main thing. The last two series, we was all clicking at one time, making shots and stuff. We wasn't clicking at one time now. This series alone, I don't think we shot the ball particularly well from the three-point line. And I think that hurt us. They was able to sit in the gaps all series, make it tough on me. And their game plan worked because we weren't making shots. But we'll be back next year, man.
And Dad, Claudia, we've talked a lot about, some of the plans for this offseason. We had Chris Hine from the Minneapolis Star-Tribune on the other day, and he pointed out what I think is ultimately going to be the truth for this team. Tim Connolly sitting in that front office there, whose background was in Denver, another place that let it sit, that kind of crock-potted their team, set it, forget it, and let it all simmer until you get a beautiful meal on the other side. There's probably not much tweaking to be done, but they are going to need guys like Karl Anthony Towns to be much more reliable on nights when everything gets thrown. It was clear Dallas is going to throw the kitchen sink at Anthony Edwards every time he touched the ball, and someone else is going to have to initiate in that game. Right. And right now, as I look at this team, Dad, while we say Luka's got Kyrie, we say Jason Tatum's got Jaylen Brown in Boston, there is not someone that I can confidently say is the firm 1B to Anthony Edwards on that team. Cat's a great player when he gets going in the right way, but in so many critical moments this postseason, I just felt like he wasn't a guy that you could rely on between the foul trouble or consistent offensive production, the way his game is structured, to go and be what they need going forward yet.
So if they don't think it's going to be Cat, then do they have to? Who else do they find to do it? I'm not saying get rid of Cat. Because I'm with you. I don't think this lineup is going to see a whole lot of reshuffling that goes on. Is it you just, for lack of a better term, hope Karl Anthony Towns becomes that guy? Or are you looking for another piece? You're always looking for another piece, but how much do you want to, kind of mess with this lineup that, again, was the third seed, but right there could have easily been the top seed on the last day of the regular season. So this is kind of a fine line to me about what you do. Do you let Karl Anthony Towns try and be that guy next year and hope he becomes that, or do you feel you have to get another piece to try and do that? Because that'd be a pretty big piece to get, right? If it's one thing to go out and find a lot of Batmans, right? That's very difficult to do. These are the big stories we would talk about like we'll talk about with Jimmy Butler. Where is he going to go? And is he going to still be a Batman somewhere? Or has he become, a 1B somewhere? and going out and getting that 1B, that's easier said than done, right? I don't know who that would be or how they would go about it. I have a feeling they're going to kind of let this lineup be what it is and just try and do better next year.
Well, I'll bring in the odds then quickly because they're at plus 850, right behind the Thunder, Nuggets, and Boston Celtics. The market's already up next season for the DraftKings Sportsbook. So as I look at this number and I listen to this conversation, I think that was the big question was, can they rely on Cat? Because there was really only one game in this series that we talked about him, and we talked about it in a way saying he finally woke up. And that's a lot of pressure for Anthony Edwards, who's only 22 years old, which he seemed fine with. But again, we have seen, if we're going to take this Batman and Robin as if I've ever seen those movies, if that's what takes you to a finals, then yes, that's not going to be enough. And sure, you have Rudy Gobert, 4-time Defensive Player of the Year, but did that really matter in the series? No, not really. So if I'm looking at these odds and looking at the structure of this team, I don't think I'd bet them. I don't know if I'd put them in the top 4, Gojo.
So we'll let my dad digest what you just said about Batman and Robin because it's clearly wounded him and he's got to process that. So what I'll say in the interim, though, to what you said, Claudia, the other thing we can't discount with this team is Anthony Edwards is going to get better. Like Anthony Edwards is 22, and I think some of that youth showed up in critical moments where he wasn't always his best. This wasn't a banner series for Anthony Edwards. He was more consistent and reliable than the other stars that we mentioned there. For Karl, some of the stuff should be correctable. He's 9 years into his career at this point, and some of the fouls that he gets into are just silly and seem irresponsible for a guy that's played as much basketball as him. So he is only 28 years old, so he's getting into that range where, hey, these should be Karl's prime years opposite Ant. But Anthony Edwards is going to continue to grow and get better. So I think that's the part where even if you leave this team as is, that guy, we're just getting started. It looked incredible, and so much of it with him is the athleticism, the attitude, the quotes that go along with it that maybe had us getting a bit in front of the game in terms of how we talked about the player. But, Dad, I think that's the part where if you are considering leaving this roster as is, you essentially got the Jimmy Butler attitude without the Jimmy Butler total disdain for Karl and the rest of the organization in Anthony Edwards. You got a guy that can lift him up and get his teammates into a better spot. And so I think that's what they're banking on is, hey, we know that Ant is just getting started.
Yeah, he is. And Karl Anthony Towns, is he going to get better? He's gotten worse from a few years ago. Was his best year in 2019, averaged 26.5 points, almost 11 rebounds, and shot over 41% from three. This year it was 21 points, 8 rebounds, and 41%. So the numbers have gone down some. So you wonder, he is still young enough, obviously, to be a great player, but you're also seeing a pattern of what he does. Well, and if it's not getting better to help a guy who is going to get better in Anthony Edwards, then do you think about changing it up?
Well, I think the stats, there are going to be Karl Anthony Towns trade rumors this offseason. And unless they're willing to get, unless we're talking about one of the true young up-and-coming stars in the season, which I don't think anyone's going to trade for Karl like that at this point, I think you sort of leave it as is. You're going to make some cosmetic changes. But, Dad, those numbers going down to me is more indicative of, hey, you've got more options on the team now. It's just not Karl Anthony Towns anymore trying to battle through this, even though they did have guys like Jimmy Butler in there before. This is different now. You've got a clear alpha on the team, and I think even Karl would acknowledge that.
Claudia, what's your favorite movie?
I've told you this, The Notebook.
Notebook. Yeah, you've seen that a lot. Notebook.
Yeah.
All right.
Go Irish.
True. So you've never seen a Batman and Robin movie?
Never seen a full one. No. I have seen J-Lo's husband. Wasn't he Batman? I watched 2 seconds of that and I tapped out, man. I can't do that.
She'd be a horrible date at a movie, Mike. You pay for her to go see a movie and she's going to want to leave 10 minutes into it.
I will watch it in the movie theater. The issue is if I'm at home, it's just, nope. I'm good.
Claudia is that person that walks by like a pizza in the kitchen and you're like, who just took a bite out of the crust and then left the piece in there? And then you look over at Claudia just waving.
Gojo and Golic, Jalen Waddle and Miami have agreed on a contract extension that makes him one of the highest paid receivers in the NFL. 3-year, $84.75 million contract, $76 million guaranteed, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter, which brings us to the conversation. Who's up next, Senior? And I know we talked about some of the guys off camera, and you said, how is Justin Jefferson not paid yet?
Yeah. Yeah, it is somewhat amazing. Club option this year, obviously that the fifth year, that $19 million. But I mean, it would seem we have a bar for what he needs to be paid. That would be the highest paid wide receiver in the league. That you know where that number is going to be. CeeDee Lamb is also out there, and given Jerry Jones' record, CeeDee Lamb will get a deal before Dak Prescott gets redone because he wanted to take care of all the other players before Dak. We saw that last time around. And then really Jamar, I think T. Higgins, Mike, is going to stay on the franchise tag, and I think he's going to play on the franchise tag. He'll be the only one that does that, I think, out of the 9 franchised players this year. So I really think it's Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson that we're waiting for. Jamar's supposed to play for $9 million this year, and then that fifth year is $21 million. But they can give him a new deal right now. So I think those are the two we're looking for now.
Yeah, which I mean, I think, like you said, Justin Jefferson can probably afford to just kick back and wait at this point, right? He's the best receiver in the NFL currently, and I'm sure it feels like, hey, I'm going to wait around and make sure my number reflects that, because we know how these things go. For the guys in this range, there's always the potential that the next person that comes along could be at that number. So I'm with you, Dad. There's security in that. I agree with you on T. Higgins. His lot in life seems pretty secure here this upcoming season with how the Bengals are going to go about this. One, being a very cheap organization, but two, also recognizing that this is a guy that's just going to put them in a place financially with the cap, with Burrow, with what Jamar is going to make, that they're not going to be able to handle much more going forward. And so they're going to try and max out this final year. What I think is also interesting coming off this, Dad, is looking at some of the wide receiver duos in the NFL, because Waddle and Tyreek Hill, probably the most unique, right? Just because of the speed on this roster here. You go back and watch Jalen Waddle, and so much, it's not to diminish the player. He's phenomenal in his own right. Over 1,000 yards last year despite missing 3 games with injury. And we saw down the stretch of the season how much the lack of him in that offense affected their overall production. But man, it's just impossible to take your eyes off Tyreek Hill and the space that he creates by being the most unique mover at that position in the NFL. But would they be the top receiver duo for you, Dad, if you had to pick any of the groups that we have around the NFL right now? Obviously, you've got Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown in Philadelphia. You've got Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua in Los Angeles. Who would you pick in looking at the best duo for wide receivers in the NFL?
Well, I mean, boy, if Cooper Kupp stays healthy, it's going to be tough to beat those two, I think, right? Kupp's starting to have the injury thing a little bit, but those two, I think would be tough to beat. Though Tyreek and Waddle, I mean, Tyreek is just such the deep threat there. Those are excellent duos. Brown and Smith in Philly as well. I still probably have to lean toward Waddle and Tyreek Hill. I think that's where I would have to lean. I mean, but it's not like because I say that, I think the others aren't good. It's like, 1A, 1B,
exactly
1C.
What you mean.
No,
that's exactly what you mean. You're slandering them. The fan base should be upset. I'll give you a list of the top 5 duos in the NFL at wide receiver right here, right now, off the rip. Number 5. I'm going to go with Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk in San Francisco. That offense we know is so much about the sum of its parts, but I think those guys, immensely talented. Ayuk's another guy due for a payday. Deebo Samuel, incredibly versatile in what he brings to the table. I would absolutely have them there. Number 4, I would go Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. I think both of them have been excellent. Obviously, last year a bit of an outlier because they didn't have their quarterback, and so the way we look at that and digest what they did, especially T. Higgins, I think is kind of an incomplete mark. But we've seen they've been great. Jamar Chase in the conversation for the best receiver in the NFL, and T. Higgins, an incredibly gifted acrobatic sideline catcher. Number 3, this is where I would go with Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. And I think what you mentioned, the injury concerns, if Cooper Kupp's fully healthy, one of the best route runners in the NFL, a guy who's been the NFL's receiving leader in a group where Puka Nacua just looked like a Greek god last year, incredibly physically gifted, will go over the middle, can do anything, a great run after the catch receiver in an offense that helps highlight that. Number 2, this is where I would go Waddle and Tyreek Hill. And we know some of the conversation with Tyreek Hill is, Is there going to be another deal there for him? He's starting to get up there a little bit, but still an incredibly gifted receiver. And then number one on this one, I go A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. I think the perfect blend of complementary skill sets here. I think you go back and we got to remember what that 2022 Eagles offense looked like and the record setting that these two helped this team go about doing. A.J. Brown, another guy, one of the most capable targets over the middle, big-bodied, incredibly physical receiver. And Devontae Smith probably doesn't get enough credit because of his build for how physically impressive he is. He's a guy that makes a ton of incredible catches, tight-roping down the sideline. And so I think the combination between those two give you so many options all across the field that combine that with their age and everything else, I would probably have those two as the duo I'd be most comfortable with if I was just starting a team from scratch, going in agnostic of the offense.
That's interesting. It is, of those 5-2, of all those quarterbacks, the one that runs the most is that quarterback in Philly and Jalen Hurts, which helps, right? When he has the running threat as well, how that can help the passing game. I would probably flip Waddle and Tyreek and make them the top duo over Brown and Smith, but it's close. The other ones let's see if Debo and Brandon Ayuk are even teammates, by the end of this thing, right? That's one. But Chase and T. Higgins probably have the ability to be the top duo, but there has been an incomplete, whether it's injuries to one of them or injuries to their quarterback, to see what they can do with full potential.
I think with Waddle and Hill, because the conversation here, like Jalen Waddle, incredibly deserving of this deal. That Alabama, it's going to be one of those pictures later on. We do that Alabama receiving room that all those guys were a part of, and the total dollars in it that I'm sure the Bama recruiting office is going to use as an advertisement. And what Waddle has done as a compliment to Tyreek and this team makes them borderline indefensible at times, Dad, because I think the argument for them being the top duo would be the threat that speed poses. I've heard Dominique Foxworth, former NFL defensive back and friend of our show over at the Dominique Foxworth Show, talk about this a lot, where when you're a defensive player, and Dad, you could speak to this, what's the thing that you look at? What's a defensive coordinator most concerned about going into a game week? It's where's the speed first and foremost, because that's the part that becomes most difficult. You've got to account for that either with extra resources or by having a lockdown guy of your own that you can put on it. But when they can trot out two guys that have that speed to burn and are used as creatively as Mike McDaniel does in that offense, it stretches you in such a different way than almost every other receiving body type can.
Yeah, it does. I mean, as a defense, when you go into a game, one of the first things you want to look at is, can we make them one-dimensional? Can we take away something from them? And then you look at the best player and say, okay, how do you mute their best player? Not necessarily stop them, but how do you slow that guy down? And when you have two, it certainly makes it a little more difficult, and then you're really relying on your pass rush, though we see a lot quicker passes nowadays, but you can pass rush, you can drop off, you can cover the quick pass, the slant, get people running out to the bubble. There are ways to do it, because in my eyes, the NFL has gotten shorter. This isn't rocket science. They're getting the ball out of their hands. Now, Tyreek Hill is always going to be that monster deep threat. But if you're a monster deep threat because you have speed, that also means you can take a 6-yard slant and go the distance, right? And the big routes nowadays in the NFL are the crossing routes, right? The natural picks, the rubs, whatever is going to free up a guy, get him the ball in space, 10, 12 yards down the field on a crossing route in open space. Those are the big things to defend nowadays.
They are, but this Dolphins offense even still pushes the ball downfield in a way that a lot of teams aren't capable of, because you can stretch the field laterally. You can then stretch it vertically. You've got two of these guys, and it's like a defensive lineman that's got a great get off, where you've got to brace for when you're going against Aaron Donald. Are we going to double team him? What things are we going to do to try and slow him down? You've got that problem 2x in Miami, and because they've locked down Jalen Waddle, they now ensure that that's going to remain a problem for years to come down there, as we wait to see if Tua Tagovailoa's extension comes pretty soon, and that core of the Dolphins team that's going to try and upset the apple cart with the Bills in that division can take that next step as a team, get Tua protected, and keep it going from there. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the world of college football. Colin Cowherd wants to do away with tradition. Is he right? As we move into this new world order. Next, here on Gojo and Golic.
part 2 of Gojo and Golic. It's about that time we talk about some college football, which brings us to Cash It or Trash It, presented by DraftKings. Stay tuned to DraftKings and this show to hear everything DraftKings has to offer. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void where prohibited. See DraftKings.com for details. We are looking at win totals for every single FBS team because DraftKings is the first book, guys, with win totals for all 134 teams. There are 5 Power 5 teams with a win total of 10.5, so they need 11 or more to hit. That is the highest win total set. You got Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, Penn State, and Texas. So with that, cash it or trash it, Gojo. If you had to cash one of those teams heading the over, who's it going to be?
Man, I mean, you probably take 2. Now, Georgia's got a difficult schedule, Dad, and there's no doubt about that. And the same's going to be said now that we've combined so many of these teams into super conferences. You look down, Ohio State, for example, they've got Oregon now in Eugene on the conference schedule this year. They finish up their season with Michigan still, the defending national champions. They're on the road in Happy Valley, but I look at Georgia and Ohio State and basically say you can put them in the college football playoff in Penn. And I think the both of them are primed for the over as well this season, Claudia. But obviously siding with Georgia is in part due to the fact that Ohio State's got Will Howard coming over. They're moving on after last season and the quarterback issues that they had there relative to the standard. But with Georgia, they're bringing back Carson Beck, who in a lackluster quarterback class overall that we're talking about right now is going to be one of the names talked about for the top guy overall. Combine that with the continuity there of Mike Bobo being back, Kirby Smart having that war machine up and fully running. And Dad, the Dogs, until further notice, even though last year didn't go the way they wanted at the end of the season against Alabama, they're still the presumptive favorites from here on out.
Yeah, those are the 2 I would take as well. Georgia does have Alabama and Texas on the schedule as well. Open up with Clemson. We'll see what they do. Again, the non-NIL or non-portal teams out there in Clemson. We'll see how that goes for them. But those are the 2 I would take as well, Ohio State and Georgia. And, I think they're definitely – now, listen, we have the expanded playoffs now as well, so – I think those 2 are absolute locks that are going to be in there. But obviously all 5. Let's do it this way. Which one do you think won't be in the playoffs out of those 5?
Ooh, out of those 5 right there, Penn State. Like I would, if you had to bank on one team disappointing somehow again, it would probably be Penn State for me. So, because looking at the rest of them there, Oregon and Dan Lanning, what the job that they have done in the NIL era, we've talked about all the change that this sport has weathered and how people have gone about it. They've embraced everything that's come their way. NIL-wise, they are stacked over there. And now they're going to be moving on from Bo Nix and what he meant for that program for the last few years. There's enough change in that where I'd have some questions. But, Dad, the foundation along the lines of scrimmage on both sides of the ball has been set. They're incredibly deep in the front 7 on defense. And so I think that's a team I could trust. Penn State's one, lost a bunch of talent that we talked about this last year on the defensive side of the ball with Chop Robinson and some of those guys. Texas, I think, is going to be really good. Although, again, scheduling is going to be something that gets talked about a lot, Dad. And you look at some of the early season slates that have been talked about. We've seen a ton of start times for games getting released by media companies in the last few days. Like Texas, who last year went on the road in Tuscaloosa and had their first big win of the season where they announced their presence with authority. Steve Sarkisian in year 3 has this program back as firm contenders. College football playoff trip last year. They're on the road at the defending national champions in Michigan in the second week of this season. Like what we're getting now with the schedule consolidation and some of these conferences being aligned. Now, this is an out-of-conference matchup early in the year, has created some incredibly compelling games early on in this season. And that's kind of the interesting thing that got talked about yesterday, Dad. Colin Cowherd over at The Herd brought this up because there had been some conversation about USC, who starts off the season against LSU. And we've seen some of these big early season primetime matchups that go off. And he made the point, as the reports had surfaced or rumor mill had surfaced, that Lincoln Riley and USC had been trying to get out of that game against LSU because you look at the rest of their schedule now in the Big Ten, and it's a juggernaut here. And Claudia, it led to an interesting point that Colin wanted to try and make overall about the state of the sport and scheduling. That's always been uneven. We saw with Michigan last year, their out-of-conference schedule, really the last few seasons, has been nil, and it worked out perfectly for them.
Yeah, and I'm very curious to see you guys' take, because when I first heard this, I can't tell if he's saying he wants to do away with tradition or if he's just saying this is one way to get around that if you want to do away with tradition. But it does mention one team that's very dear to this show. Take a listen.
I'm going to ask a question. Why do they have to keep playing Notre Dame? Colin, the history. Oh, give me a break. College football punted on history last year.
Okay, again, team that holds near and dear to your hearts, of course. Senior, what is your first reaction to this one?
I mean, they have punted on history. With the conference shakeups you had natural rivalries in conferences, and all of a sudden that's changed. Remember, this isn't the first conference realignment we've had. It's one of the biggest we've had because one of the conferences basically is dissolved. But this isn't the first time it's happened where conference rivals, all of a sudden one of those teams is in a different conference. That doesn't mean you can't still have the rivalry. You don't get to decide, what's a rivalry anymore, right? Now he's saying why keep playing, Notre Dame, maybe because, the schedule, you already have a tough schedule with the Big Ten schedule to keep playing Notre Dame. But I mean, you don't get to decide what's a rivalry and what's not. Rivalries kind of happen between schools and fans and alumni of those schools. And obviously this Notre Dame USC rivalry has been going on for a long time. I think it will continue to go on. But his initial point of the NCAA's punted on this a while ago, that's true. It has. And now that just by teams leaving their conferences, that doesn't mean the rivalries still can't exist. They can, but by dividing these teams up out of the conferences, they have kind of taken the air out of it a little bit because sometimes those teams stop playing one another.
Yeah, listen, there's a lot of things, and I won't even say the NCAA, like the conferences and the member institutions decided this stuff in the way that they organized a lot of this.
I'm just making one thing. Yeah.
The conference realignment changed a lot of that, but even we've seen now as some of that consolidations happen, the Red River game is going to kick off at 3:30 instead of 11 local. It's got a lot of people hot and bothered. The Egg Bowl got moved from Thanksgiving to Black Friday and changed up there. There are going to be little tweaks all over the sport where you're right. Most of the power brokers in the sport have abandoned the things that made it run for so long, which is heated geographical rivalries, teams that you had been used to, fan bases that are rubbed up against each other. College Game Day, arguably the biggest property and most important in the history of telling the story of college football, made its living going into different towns and telling the small stories that happened there. I think that's still what fuels the sport, but it's not what fuels the TV ratings. Everything about the future of the sport is, hey, we've seen what these big-time rating games can do. Let's tie them all together and make more of them. And what it's landed us on is, Dad, the beginning of these super conferences, the Big Two and the Big Ten and the SEC. And I think Colin's point is understandable, given what we've got now and given what we've seen work in an expanded playoff era especially. Why do you need to expose yourself to more risk when a team like Michigan in the last couple seasons has shown you, hey, you win one or two big games, you go beat up on a weak non-con schedule, and you keep yourself fresh and ready knowing the quality of your team for the important games that matter at the end of the year?
I guess to that point, why didn't Colin say why is USC and Notre Dame play when USC was still in the Pac-12? Because a lot of these rivalries we talk about are conference rivalries. Notre Dame and USC has always been non-conference. That's one of the biggest rivalries. So why didn't, to make the road easier for USC in the Pac-12, why wasn't he saying then, why does USC keep needing to play Notre Dame?
Because the current Big Ten is much tougher than the late-stage Pac-12 was, outside of last year where you had this conglomeration of talent. But usually a team like USC, when the Pac-12 was getting weaker, and over the last few years that we saw, the way that conference wasn't as competitive on the big stage overall in the landscape of college football, a game like Notre Dame could have been the difference between you going out there and getting an invite to the playoff, especially when it was a much more restricted field. But now the point is, we're taking more teams into the playoff. You're in one of the have conferences here. And so outside of conference play, why do you really need to stress yourself when we've seen there's really no upside to that?
Yeah, I mean, I see that to a point, but how many Pac-12 championships did USC win when it was getting weaker? And they were still playing Notre Dame, and when they would lose to Notre Dame, it didn't help them. So what, you could have dumped them then.
I understand you could have. I don't want this to happen. Like, I do think at some point, somebody's got to care about the things that I still ultimately believe are good for the sport. And these old rivalries, these things that have united. And I mean, listen, if you're a big time college football power broker, you would also like Notre Dame and USC to continue playing. Now, Colin made the point of, you know, tell Notre Dame to join the Big Ten and then you'll play them again there. But overall, this is one of the money games. This is one of the ones that has caused some of the consolidation around college football. When you look up and see these helmet games, and then there's always butts in seats. There's always people watching on TV. And I hope that the people involved still care enough about this to play this game. But Dad, Colin strategically is not wrong, because this is what college football has showed us can be the case going forward.
And I agree. Look at all the Nebraska rivalries with the Big 12, and then they went to the Big 10 and they were gone. Now, wait a minute. Did Colin say if Notre Dame wants to play USC, tell them to join the Big 10? Did Colin say that?
I think that was in the longer version of the clip. Yeah.
Well, if that's just a stupid comment. I mean, that's just, you're not going to say, oh, so we can keep playing USC we're going to join a conference. That's just dumb. That's just a ridiculous comment.
He's not saying that would be leverage to make them join a conference, but he's saying, hey, if you're USC and if Notre Dame eventually joins the Big Ten, then great, you get the rivalry back, but why would you subject yourself to this? And Colin made it clear, this is out of respect for Notre Dame. They're a very good program right now. They're a risk on your resume, and that's the thing that I think most programs are going to be gauging going forward, especially after Michigan got over this hump. Like Texas getting to the college football playoff last year, going on the road and playing what was then still an out-of-conference game. Like, remember, LSU was supposed to play, I think it was, there was supposed to be an out-of-conference matchup early in the season. I forget if it was LSU and Oklahoma or what. Oklahoma was supposed to play somebody, and they balked and backed out of that game because they were getting ready to be conference mates coming up the following year. Texas kept that game on the schedule, and it was one of the biggest boosts for their entire season. It was one of the moments where we looked and said, Texas is back, and not ironically. And so now going forward, you have to weigh, like we have during the entire playoff era. Hey, are those out-of-conference games still worth it because of that splash you get? Notre Dame and USC that usually play at the end of the season. If you're USC and you're on the bubble with some of these teams, could a win on the road, or hosting South Bend, because we don't play them in South Bend in November because they don't want that snow. But if you get that win at home against a good Notre Dame team at the end of the season, is that an added resume boost that in a crowded field could help you with seeding or any number of things? That's what teams are going to have to weigh now.
Yes, and that I agree with. That's going to be, and to Colin's point, that's going to be all on USC, whether they want to keep playing Notre Dame or not, because they are definitely in a tougher conference in the Big Ten. So that would be on USC. Do we not want that smoke either in the middle of the season in South Bend or at the end of the season at USC? Because there are still a lot of those people that think Notre Dame eventually would end up in the Big Ten. I don't think it's going to be as eventually as we all think once they expand to the playoffs and put the nod in there for Notre Dame to be 14 or better to still get that automatic bid. I think they have a good route into the playoffs. So I don't think that's going to affect that Notre Dame stays independent for a long while, which would, again, put it on USC whether they want to continue or not.
Well, let me ask you this then, because their win total's 10. Like I said, 10.5 is the highest, so they're right underneath. And remember, too, with all those schools that I mentioned, the juice is varying on the over. Like Ohio State is minus 140 to the over versus Texas plus 140 to the over. So that minus means, of course, Ohio State more likely than Texas. But with Notre Dame, this line set at 10, the over is even money. So books are like, we don't know. 10 feels like a safe number. Senior, does that feel like a safe number to you, or would you go over there?
Oh, I think they can go over that. You look at their schedule this year. This is, every year people say about Notre Dame, well, who do they play? And then you look at the schedule and you realize they play some pretty damn good teams. The schedule is definitely down a little bit this year. There's no doubt about it. But they're a team, because they're independent, they're not going to drop USC. They need games like that. They got to have strong teams like that. And they normally do have a strong schedule because that's what they have to show, because there is no conference championship for them to be in. They don't play on conference championship weekend. So they have to have a strong resume from an independent standpoint, and USC helps with that.
Yeah, Dad, that is an interesting thing, though, for Notre Dame going forward is, will other power teams decide this, or will the money always be good enough? Will the opportunity always be good enough? Or will other teams spurn them as well for the out-of-conference resume? Like, yeah, you'll get the ACC games and five of those every year with that tacit association, that half in, they have out, half out right now. But some years you're going to get this where you look at the schedule and there's not a lot of juice from an excitement standpoint in the home slate or the competitive standpoint in terms of your playoff resume. Like Notre Dame, Claudia, to your point, I would probably bet the over because that's the talent that's on this team and the schedule lines up well for it right now between where they're hosting teams or away for teams. The test at College Station at the beginning of the season is going to be by far the toughest game on their schedule as it sits right now, just in terms of the opponent, the talent on the other side of the football, and the fact that it's on the road hot as hell at the end of August at College Station, which is going to be a bear. But the talent on this team, provided the offensive line's in a good place, should be absolutely an 11 or 12 win team and someone who's winning multiple playoffs games this year. That should be the standard in South Bend. The irony of all this, though, for the USC conversation this year, because I do think that'll be interesting existentially for Notre Dame now, if this becomes more the norm going forward, or if they can keep getting big-time games on the schedule as other teams make this choice, a lot like we've talked about with players who have to choose whether or not to stay or go, whether or not to forego the bowl games and get ready for the draft. Teams now, as we reorg this entire sport, are going to have different decisions to make about scheduling. The irony for USC this year is, Dad, I looked down at their first year in Big Ten play, and yes, they start off Sunday, September 1st. They're in one of the standalone games against USC out at Allegiant Stadium in Vegas. Going to be an awesome environment. The Bayou and Sin City, dear God, help them all. But after that, yes, they're on the road at Michigan, which is going to be big time. But after that, the rest of the schedule in the Big Ten, Wisconsin, we still don't know in year 2 under Luke Fickell. They were supposed to be everyone's dark horse last year and maybe weren't quite as ready for that moment. On the road at Minnesota, who has been a fine team, usually stout defense in the Big Ten, but never much to write home about. Penn State, we'll wait and see. At Maryland, sans Talia Tungavailoa. Rutgers on the road at a Washington team that under Jed Fish is getting ready to completely reorganize after that cavalcade of guys left in the portal. Nebraska, wait and see. At UCLA, changing coach, wait and see. And then versus Notre Dame at home. So it's not a murderer's row in year 1 in the Big Ten by any means.
And we sit there and say how the Big Ten was stronger than the Pac-12. It wasn't last year. And the Pac-12's last year in existence, they were the stronger conference, but over a number of years they were. But if you start to break it down, how deep is the Big Ten, right? You really start to break it down. It's been Ohio State, Michigan, then Penn State, right? And Penn State has found a way to disappoint over time. Then after that, who is it? Who is it, and where are they? Not only who is the 4th, 5th, or 6th team in the conference, but where do they stack up nationally as well?
Well, the big one that's going to get inserted this year is going to be Oregon. They're going to immediately walk in and be looking eye level with most of those programs.
I'm talking the old Big Ten. We kept talking about how strong they were. They were not deep. Now, certainly adding the Pac-12, that adds to it. But I guess my point was, with the Big Ten and what it was, they were 3 deep. And that was really it. Occasionally they had a 4th strong team. But now, yes, it is definitely a big-time power conference bringing in the Pac-12, which how strong they were last year.
I can hear seething Iowa Hawkeyes fans right now pointing at double-digit wins damn near every year without playing offense, by the way, which will be interesting now. Obviously, the Brian Ferentz era over on offense in Iowa, so we'll wait and see if they can manufacture that. But Iowa has been very steady on their side of the Big Ten, and that's the other part now. You're doing away with division, so you're going to have everyone mixed in there and truly get the matchup of the best teams at the end of the year, not just the Big Ten East eating the Big Ten West alive. So lots of changes afoot in the sport. Ultimately, I hope the individual schools still decide to care about a lot of these rival games. I understand that there's not much incentive to do it, and this is a sport that's shown you as we get ready for the potential influx of private equity money that they are also ruthlessly pursuing profit in exchange for the soul of the sport. But I still think at the end of the day, that soul is what's going to keep this running even in the new world. It's the fact that in all these off the beaten path towns, you've got enough people that are willing to care about this for any number of reasons, some of which include hating the team that plays down the street and has similar colors and history to them.
I just want to say about Iowa, you want to be relevant, get in that 10-yard area that's called the end zone occasionally, and that'll help.
They do on defense and special teams, Dad. How dare you? 3 words, Hawkeye pride. Have some respect for what's going on out in that proud program. Maybe. Coming up next, we'll check in with an former NFL veteran, trying to do some good for his brothers as they take that leap from players to former players and all the complications that come from it. Next here on Gojo and Golic. All right, excited to welcome in our next guest, Super Bowl champion and former NFL defensive lineman Malik Jackson, kind enough to join us here now. Malik has also started a group called Care League and Partners to help retired players utilize and maximize their healthcare benefits post-career, which obviously we want to hit on, with a former NFL defensive player in here, a guy who's made that transition successfully. But the other thing we got to talk about, Malik, is we always hear about offensive linemen losing weight post-career. You and my dad have put on for D linemen here. So how does it feel to kind of represent for the side of the ball that hasn't been getting all the headlines about this post-career weight loss?
I know it's been aggravating. I'm like, man, we're out here getting our skinny bodies on too, but for me, when I retired, first of all, thank you for having me on, guys. It's an honor and a pleasure. But for me, when I retired, I see a lot of guys go one of two ways. Either you plump up or you get skinny. And for me, trying to eat every day, all day, to keep the weight, and all that, I was like, nah, I gotta lose this. So I went plant-based, just eating fruits and veggies, and really just trying to get the body together from all the damage that I put it through the last decade plus.
The one thing we're seeing is these old linemen, Malik, are losing weight and running marathons. As a D lineman, I lost probably close to 80, 85 pounds since my playing days, and I never thought once about running a marathon. Did it ever cross your mind to do?
No, my knees wouldn't allow me to even think about it. So, for me, it's one of those things. I'm just happy on the, the elliptical or the Stairmaster. Yeah. That's about the most I can do. And it's funny we say that. I saw my boy Orlando Franklin for the first time in a long time. And it looked like the weight just melted off of him. I was like, I just remember you so big and brolic, and now he's just a little man. I'm like, it's awesome to see when guys really take their health into their own hands. And it's cool to see the transformation that the body can give you if you just, give it the right things and give it time.
Yeah, for you, why did you become so passionate about trying to help former players sort of make this next transition, especially when it comes to their health and safety in mind?
For me, it was important because when you retire, when you're playing, you kind of take for granted the benefits that you have having that training room, right? You walk in there, you say, hey, I have a rash on my arm. I want to take care of it. They give you a slip. You go see the doctor. I remember I had like a certain panic attack or something, and then damn near drove into the ER room, right? So it's one of those things you take, and then once you retire, you're sitting at your kitchen table looking at a basic plan and a standard plan from insurance. Like, what is this? I have no idea. And I realized at the age of 32 when I retired, I knew nothing about healthcare. Everything was pretty much taken care of for me. And I'm a novelist, not even understanding how to, take care of myself. So for me, it was important to really give guys their lives back and give them something that they're used to, a service they're used to, and give them all the benefits that the NFL has to offer. Because I think the NFL does a great job of really putting things out there for us. But for one reason or another, guys don't really know how to access them or get them in a timely manner that can truly help them.
Man, I mean, that is 1,000% correct. It's one thing to try and get players to ask for help, right? Because we're so used to kind of training on our own and saying, no, it doesn't hurt. We're going to rub dirt on it. We're going to get back on the field. We're going to play. And then you're right. There are programs out there for players to take advantage of, but they either don't want to do it or don't know how to do it. So how has this been received, what you have been doing to kind of open former players' eyes to get some of this help they need?
Yeah, it's been received really well. I've done a lot of interviews with guys. That's one of the things that was important to me. I didn't want to create something that I thought I needed. I want to create something that the masses think we need. What do guys really want? What are they looking for? So when I've did my 50+ interviews with guys really trying to understand what they want and the things they're looking for, they were like, yeah, if we can get something that allows us to give us peace of mind in the healthcare space, they would love to have it. One of the things I learned is that when we retire, we go through a host of issues, right? For me, it was identity issues. For some people, it's identity issues, marital issues, financial issues, a host of issues, and on top of that, having to take care of your life medically can be a real challenge, whether it be financially or just personally, whatever it means to you. So it's been really like people are like, yeah, once you get this up and going, let me know. I would love to join. I'd love to be a part of it. So I'm just really excited talking to the right people and making sure we're doing something to where the NFL can see us and be proud of us and want to show us off. And the players, the ex-players and their families can see it as somebody reliable that won't just like sell them snake oil, but really has their best interest at heart. Thank you for all the sacrifice that you put in, Mr. Golic, man, because we've came a long way. being able to, you see, you guys playing for what you played for. Now you got guys getting $500 million contracts. So, I like to say to every legend before me, thank you for the sacrifice you made for the game so we can sit here and live and have these experiences.
Yeah, listen, we did that with the group before us. I mean, you're always, always on somebody else's shoulders. And people always say, oh, man, are you jealous of what the guys make today? I'm like, hell no. I'm like, this is how it's supposed to work. I mean, the league's making more money. The owners are becoming bigger billionaires. Why shouldn't the players, receive that as well? So it's going exactly the way it should go. Yeah, agreed. Now we just got to get more millionaires, because I try, I don't watch basketball because I'm like, man, I can't believe these contracts, especially more than one guy. I'm like, this is crazy, but it's, some little personal issues.
It's wild to see just how quickly that all jumps up there. And you're right, it's that next generation of guys that's always going to benefit. I wanted to ask you, speaking of the next generation of D linemen, about a guy that you encountered towards the end of your career in 2021 in Cleveland, and Myles Garrett. As you look out amongst the defensive players in the league right now, you got to play with Von Miller early on in your career and seeing Myles Garrett late in your career. What separates a guy like Myles from everybody else right now as he's that defensive player of the year?
I truly think Myles just takes it seriously. I think he puts himself in a different realm, day in, day out at practice. He's focused. He really believes in helping the young guys and bringing them along. And then doing that, teaching the young guys the basics of what he's doing. He keeps refining his strengths and the few weaknesses he has. So I think he just really, and he's a student of the game. In the offseason, he's taking it serious. I see him a lot going with different specialty coaches. And old school defensive line coaches and really putting in the work to come in. I mean, the guy's a physical specimen as well. I don't know if he was born with those ankles and knee to be able to bend like that, but the guy's just a beast. But I think before any of that, he takes it seriously and he understands the opportunity he has in the moment, and he's taking it by the horns.
So who was the best defensive player you played with, and then who was the best offensive player you ever played against?
The best defensive player I played with, I think for me, and I learned a lot, and the reason why I say it's Von Miller. The reason why I say that is because being young and early, I realized the benefits of being able to sit back, be quiet, and watch somebody do it in front of you and learn from them. And I think that's where I got a lot of my success from, is being able to watch a guy like Von Miller and be able to see the things that he did and make it my own. Now, granted, I couldn't bend like that or do like that. But I had to learn to put my body in position and grow. And, so I give a lot of my success to him. The best offensive player I went against, I'd have to say, well, like I said, Louis Vasquez in practice was kicking my butt. So he had a lot of help with my evolution. But outside of that, I think it's guy Shaquille Mason for when he was on the Patriots. It was really fun battles against him. It was a lot of back and forth. So he's one of the guys. And Brandon Brooks. I got to say Brandon Brooks as well. He's a guy that really, when I saw them, I knew wasn't going to be an easy day.
I was going to say some of the best interior offensive linemen in the NFL by far.
For sure.
So for a lot of us that never got close to getting a ring, where is your Super Bowl ring, and do you ever wear it out?
Yeah, the ring is it's in the closet in the jewelry box, locked away. It's funny, if I can go take it to the store and buy food with it, I'd wear it all the time. But it's one of those things that it just stays in the closet. Some days I'll go in there and try to get it out, look at it, show it off. But and a lot of days it just sits there. But the days I want to kind of remember, the good old days, and maybe in the Super Bowl every year I'll bring it out. But it really just stays in the box.
Can't thank you enough for the time here, man. Best of luck with this new venture. I'm excited for former players to be able to have this resource and to make this next step in their transition a smooth one.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for your platform. Thank you for the time. Really respect what you're doing, Mr. Golic. Like I said, thank you for everything you've done for the game, and respect you and watching you guys both play. If anybody would like to get in contact with Careling Partners, our number is 213-341-2681, or you can go to carelingpartners.com. It's really a goal of mine to give guys their health back and truly help guys conquer the next stage of life. So thank you guys for your platform.
Thank you, Malik.
Absolutely. Thanks, Malik.
Awesome.
Really appreciate it.
Great stuff.
Gojo and Golic. And Hard Knocks is back to the Chicago Bears. Caleb Williams, we get to see it all in the offseason heading up to the season. What do we think about this, guys? We're already getting the drama headlines that he's struggling in OTAs and all of that. So I assume most people will be watching this senior.
I mean, to hear that he's struggling now, I mean, give me a break. It's just ridiculous talk. But no, I think it's a good team to have. A young quarterback, a young, I hope, with the Chicago Bears, such a, historic team in the NFL. Can they get back on their feet? They've had such trouble finding a quarterback. We know all the storylines, and now there's been nothing really but positive talk of having the number one pick, getting Caleb Williams, the job Ryan Poles has done as the GM and acquiring talent. It looks like it's a team that's on the rise. So, Mike, I think it's a perfect team to look at Hard Knocks as you're developing young players to try and turn this organization around.
Yeah, this is a huge win. And look, the Hard Knocks franchise has expanded a lot now. There are 3 Hard Knocks, the off-season Hard Knocks, the in-season Hard Knocks, and the preseason one. And listen, call me old-fashioned. It's no slight on the in-season or off-season. There's just too much content now, and I don't have a well-worn track record. Like, I've watched Hard Knocks for a long time. I've been here since day one, and I'm going to probably keep staying around and at least checking out some of this. The Bears at least give you a bunch of compelling stuff. It'll be the first time since Johnny Manziel in 2018 that we've had a number 1 overall pick quarterback in the Hard Knocks show. It's the first time the Bears have ever been the franchise on Hard Knocks. And so I think, Dad, Caleb Williams is the perfect subject for this because he is inherently interesting. And he's a guy that's used to having the spotlight on him. Going back to even the Detroit Lions, which is the last time I think I was really bought into a Hard Knocks, it was Dan Campbell that ended up being the star of the show. There were a bunch of good players on that team, but as far as the truly compelling story, it was Dan Campbell, this oddity of a coach and this ankle-biting, knee-biting guy that all of a sudden turned into the lovable teddy bear we know him today at the helm of a really good team in the NFC. For the Bears, I do think their player is not just interesting because he's a quarterback, not just interesting because he's number 1 overall, but interesting in his personality. And I also think going to be interesting. I mean, he's been... Polarizing is the wrong word because it's unfair to him because most of that's driven by old people that are just not familiar with the way that anyone his age lives their life and lives it as publicly as he has. So I'm pumped to watch the reaction to all that.
I am too, and I think it was the absolute right move to just name him the starter. Matt Eberflus right out of the gate. He's the starting quarterback. Get him right in there. Get him learning the system, but in there with the number 1 team. So I think they're doing everything right. Obviously, you go from no pads to practical application on the field. We'll see. But I think this is a win for a franchise in Hard Knocks, Mike, that to me has taken some hard knocks over the years. It's not been as compelling to me as it's been. I only watched that one. I've not watched the in-season one. I'm certainly not watching the OTA one or whatever the hell that's going to be. But I am interested back in this one again, yes.
Yeah, this is the 19th year they've done Hard Knocks. And it kind of runs into the same problem because this is, and folks, I'm not breaking any news here. This is reality television. Like, you're basically watching The Bachelor in pads. And the same problem that the Bachelor franchise runs into is after a while, the same formula kind of gets old. Right. We know all the ebbs and flows of it. And much like in the Bachelor franchise where we've seen, hey, most people are just on this show to get famous. On Hard Knocks, it's become a puff piece. Like what used to feel like an intimate view inside of something real has now become a good chance at propaganda for whatever team's out there. It's the Hard Knocks bump. It's why some of us had trouble wondering, how much should I buy into this Detroit Lions team coming off that Hard Knocks, because they were so likable and it was so enjoyable, but how much of that translates to something real? Because we know the NFL has to kind of meet these teams halfway on the way that this is produced, or else none of them want them inside the building. So I do think it relies so heavily now on the characters, and thankfully you've got good ones here in the quarterback. You know, for Matt Eberflus, it'll be interesting because he's a guy that outside of having a great head of hair is relatively anonymous as a head coach. And so will this be something that allows people to get to know him a little bit more through that process as well and make this Bears team that the NFL, I'm sure, would love to see back and relevant again in a meaningful way, a big-time player like a lot of those other teams?
I think the best thing about Hard Knocks is you look at the team and the expectation is this guy or this guy or this guy is going to be the star, and then it's somebody else. So, and I'm waiting to see who that person is, right? There's always a person you don't expect that all of a sudden becomes the star, and you can't wait to see them week to week.
I mean, yeah, go.
If they want to make this a good drama, though, they would do a cutaway to Justin Fields and get his take on what they did in the offseason to set up for their new rookie quarterback, which they did not do for Justin Fields. That is a Bachelor show I would watch.
That is, see, Claudia, you're thinking like a reality TV show television producer now. You bring back in a toxic ex relationship and insert it into the current happy dynamic. I'm so proud of you, Claudia. That's great.
Thank you.
That's heady work right there.
Yeah.
This is what we're doing. Sign Claudia up to be one of the NFL script writers for this upcoming season. And oh, by the way, we can add to that pile. Guys, it happened. The woke mob of special teams coaches have come for Harrison Butker. After his speech now, the libs wouldn't let it rest. And now apparently, Claudia, his job is on the line.
Yes, well, with this new rule, the way that kickoffs are going to be handled in games, people started coming up with, speaking of Justin Fields, different ways to use position players, like having Justin Fields return kicks. I don't know who came up with that one, but yesterday, Kansas City Chiefs special teams coordinator Dave Tobes explained some ideas that he has been thinking of.
I like to have somebody that can go back, is able to make a tackle. I mean, Butker's able to make a tackle, but I really don't want him making tackles all year long, If you watch the XFL, we watched every play. I bet kickers were involved in probably at least 25 to 40% of the tackles. Either trying to make a guy bounce back or making the tackle itself or just missing the tackle. So, we don't want Butker in that situation, but he will be a kicker. He'll be a guy that we will use in certain situations. He's got a lot of ability to move the ball, whereas those other guys may not be as, apt at doing that. And, we'll use him. He can still kick a touchback if we need it. Justin can cover. I mean, he can kick, which he can do, and then he can go down there and make tackles. He's an extra guy that they're probably not accounting for. They know that guy can go down and tackle, but a guy like Justin is a guy that they have to worry about. You have to get him blocked, and they have to give up blocking somebody else.
So the reference there was to Justin Reed, who's a safety, but we've also seen when injuries popped up, moonlight as a kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. And Dad, special teams coaches right now, I have to imagine this is the most excited they have been in years. You give them a new innovation like this where they get to go through and spend the offseason poring over strategy. He's been grinding through XFL tape here, trying to find all the hidden advantages. And one of the ones they brought up was potentially having a position player. Dad, we always talk about the more you can do. It used to be for me coming into the league, learn to long snap. For some guys now, if you're like a linebacker or a tight end, baby, it's learn to kick because you can go out there and make yourself a weapon.
Yeah, again, just so everybody understands the rules of why, he said Harrison could still kick off. We want him to kick it out of the end zone or a touchback. That's costly now, right? If touchbacks now go to the 30-yard line, and you don't want to give up the ball to the 30-yard line. And there's what's called the landing zone. That's the 20-yard line to the goal line. If you kick it short of the landing zone, the ball goes to the 40-yard line. So you want to be in that landing zone. It's encouraging returns. The kicker can't pass the 50-yard line until the ball is touched. But to the coach's point, kickers have been more involved in tackles now where this has been used. So this is interesting. There will be a strategy. With the last time the kickoff changed a bit, I think it was Bill Belichick who was first using the coffin corner type kick it inside the 5-yard line toward one of the corners to kind of pin somebody in. So you'll find, and you're right, Mike, this is a special team coach's dream. They're just sitting there just thinking of scenarios of how they could take advantage of these rules, and this is one of them. We heard the ridiculous one of Justin Fields may return kicks. If they put him back for one kickoff return, the coach should be fired, the special team coach. But this is interesting, having a person with the ability to tackle be the kickoff guy, because you want it in between the 20-yard line and the end zone. So start practicing your kickers, you regular position players.
That or have kickers start doing steroids. This can go one of two ways here right now, but at this point, I think we have to officially declare special teams woke, and God forbid if the Chiefs win a game 34-0 this year, we're going to have some real issues on our hand, folks. Real issues on our hands. All right, time to finish off the show and the week. Short week, holiday week. How about it, folks? The way we always do. This, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off into the weekend. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. And if you missed that, we're on from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. The best of Gojo and Golic, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. And if you missed that or any of our great guests, thank you to PGA Tour golfer Keegan Bradley, who joined us here. And also Malik Jackson, former NFL defensive lineman. If you missed either of those two, you can get it wherever you get your podcast or as soon as we get done here on YouTube. And guys, let's start with this, that, and the third at a place we're often used to. Popcorn buckets. Sexualized popcorn buckets have become incredibly in vogue ever since Dune 2 came out and decided to let their freak flag fly at the movie theaters. And this time around, Ryan Reynolds and company could not wait to jump in on the action. We've got the new Deadpool versus Wolverine popcorn buckets here. See if you can identify the feature on this that might be interesting to some. They gave it a tongue.
Yeah, they did.
It looks like it has a tongue.
Oh, no, it has a tongue. If you're not watching people, it has a tongue. It's a massive hole with a tongue. It has a tongue
and a very, very big mouth that holds the popcorn.
The popcorn's what goes in there.
Yeah, into the mouth.
It's a massive hole, so yeah, that's meant for popcorn. Let's be real.
Popcorn buckets, but of course you need some
Fellas,
hot butter.
be honest with yourself. Popcorn's the only thing that needs to be thought about in there.
Yeah.
You need some butter in that pot. Listen, I am a Deadpool fan. I am a Ryan Reynolds fan. I cringe to even ask you, Claudia, if you've seen Deadpool.
Absolutely not. I think that Ryan Reynolds is a great dude. Like, I'm sure he's a great man, good husband and father, great family.
But what?
I don't think he's funny, guys. I really don't think he's funny. Maybe I'll have to watch Deadpool, but I just... Yeah, he's like corny.
Claudia,
he's just too corny.
This is one of these things where I don't know what leg you have to stand on here because at most you've probably seen, a quarter of a Ryan Reynolds movie at this point? You probably watched the first 5 minutes of The Proposal. You maybe saw Blade Trinity for like 30 whole seconds. You probably don't even know what that movie is. So why am I supposed to believe your bona fides when it comes to even knowing if Ryan Reynolds is funny or not? Where have you even seen Ryan Reynolds?
He's just corny, y'all. Like, I can just, by looking at him, he's corny. And by
hearing the jokes, I've seen
him in commercials for the soccer team. You know, like, he's just corny, and I will die on that hill. He's a cornball.
Wow.
What?
Wow. I don't even know what to say.
I am not alone in this. I guarantee you several people think he's a cornball.
Oh, I guarantee you are in the high minority on this.
At Gojo and Golic, do you agree with Claudia Bellafato? And I want to make that distinction very clear because me and Dad, huge Ryan Reynolds fans, love Ryan Reynolds. He's in my Mount Rushmore of podcast guests along with T-Pain and Jon Stewart. So I don't want to make sure we fumble the bag on this. Do you agree with Claudia Bellafato at Gojo and Golic on Twitter that Ryan Reynolds is, quote, corny?
Okay, I'm saying the character they give him is often corny. I'm sure he's a great guy. I'm sure he's a great guy.
You said Ryan Reynolds is corny. Don't backtrack on it now.
Just stand on what you said, Claudia.
No,
by the way,
now
can I just say...
I want to be friends with him.
No.
Oh, and how the tables turn, Mr. Powers. You know what? I will say, too, before I'll bail Claudia out here before we throw her to the social media wolves, is they do need to make a sexualized popcorn bucket for the ladies now. These have all been tailored, I think, to one gender. I think we need a sexy lady popcorn bucket to go and give people something fun to think about in the movie theaters.
No, you see, we're mature. So we go to the movies to watch a movie and eat popcorn, not sexualize the bucket that we're eating the popcorn out of. We're women and we're mature.
Hey,
whatever.
But thanks for trying to include us. Very feminist.
I am an ally, and I just want to have everybody enjoy their time at the movie theater however they choose to do that. Claudia, let's get to that and one of the most cringeworthy moments of the week.
Oh, my God. The second I saw this, I said, oh, no, I can't watch it, but I had to. Darren Waller came out with a music video, At first, I thought it would be from his perspective, but then I listened and now it makes sense. It is about his breakup with Kelsey Plum, but it's from her perspective. The title of the song, Who Knew? Her Perspective. And in case you haven't heard it, we have a little something for you. I'm walking on a beach.
You know, in life, it's hard to love. It's hard to be free. It's hard to get out of your soul.
It sounds terrible. First of all, he's talking about how hard love is, bro. You cheated on your girl. And she is meant to look like Kelsey Plum. I think the best part of this, though, I didn't realize Gojo at the end, she stabs him in the back.
I was going to say, it got violent at the end of this video here. And, Dad, listen, everybody processes their situation differently in general. I like to stay out of the business of couples, even celebrity couples here. But man alive, to lob this kind of content to the timeline before this season, Dad, the only route he has to go, it has to be a 1,000-yard, 10-touchdown season for Darren Waller this year. He's got no other choice but to ball.
Or retire.
He will have less people on his side than Claudia has on her side of calling Ryan Reynolds corny. I mean, they are both on an island, and the auto-tuning on that song is just horrific. I hope it was meant to be that way. I hope we were meant to listen to that to say, oh, part of this ridiculousness is how bad the auto-tune is on the singing, because it was horrific, and he is just getting dragged everywhere, which he should be.
It's also so pick-me for him to be like, this is the first time I've done music like this and from another person's perspective. Boy, just get ready for the season. Would you stop? You already make a fool of yourself by dropping that bag because Kelsey Plum is amazing at basketball and she's also a dime. So I don't know what this man's doing, but he's doing it wrong and he should stick to football. Sorry.
Yeah, apparently he's still deciding if he wants to play this season or continue forward with his career. But all I know is you mentioned Kelsey Plum, who has chosen violence in her own way to start this season post-breakup. But I will say this. I would pay hundreds of dollars, pay-per-view prices, to have had just a peek at the Las Vegas Aces group chat yesterday. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying is that had to be one of the most entertaining places on earth.
That locker room. You know what goes on in locker rooms, Mike. That had to be incredible, how he was getting destroyed by all them.
Honestly, from a girl's perspective who's been cheated on several times, this is the best scenario in the world. Because it's not like you can even miss him. You're never going to be jealous about him ever again in your life. Whenever you get sad, you pull up that video, whatever that was, you listen to that, and you are good. You are set for life. Divorce, thing of the past.
All right, well, speaking of a thing of the past, let's get to the third and finish off with something that Lenny Kravitz has left behind, apparently. Sex.
Yep, doing the deed. Apparently 9 years. He said he's trying to be celibate, so after cheating on Lisa Bonet, he said, I'm done. And it's been 9 years that he's been in a relationship since he has been, so apparently he's just stopped it altogether, Senior.
Reflecting on the infidelity to Bonet, Lenny told The Guardian his dad predicted he'd end up living the same lifestyle, and it turned out to be true, that his dad lived, of cheating on his partner. But, I mean, is this the way? Is he punishing himself? Is that what he's doing? 9 years? I mean, what the hell are we doing? 9 years without sex? I mean, seriously?
I think it's one of those things. I commend him for trying to change his ways after going out here and living wrong and hurting other people with all that. But I think it's more the fact that, like, it's Lenny Kravitz. Like, the guy is like a legitimate tried and true rock star. And it seems like in this case, trying to go 9 years being Lenny Kravitz and not having sex has to be a Herculean effort it takes to avoid those kind of situations.
You know what he must have a lot of? Probably a collection of, Gojo?
Dune popcorn buckets. Yeah, buddy.
Boy.
I didn't say it.
And so 9 years of no sex, and it's Lenny Kravitz. Lenny friggin' Kravitz, one of the coolest dudes around.
Just drugs and rock and roll. That's it.
Wow.
Yeah,
They better be
cut out the first one.
In fact, that's the route.
Change up the formula here. If you enjoy the formula for this show, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review it. Leave us a 5-star rating. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll talk to you Monday.